Welcome to episode number two of the Pocket CI podcast. I'm your host, John. And today we're going to be talking about setting expectations for clinic rotations. This is something that's covered a little bit during PT school, but I felt like from my experience, they could have given me a couple more things to think about or a couple more concrete actions to take leading up to clinicals to make sure that I was on the same page as my CI. And then when I was a clinical instructor with my first student, I was able to see things from the other side, and there were different things that I felt like could have made my life easier, and could have made the overall transition for the student a little bit easier. So we'll talk about it from both perspectives and hopefully leave you guys with some good tips and things that you can do to set yourself up for success heading into that first rotation. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a story here. When I had my first student, I thought they were ghosting me completely. I had reached out a couple times in the weeks leading up to the start of their clinic rotation. I didn't hear from them at all. So I was like, are they even interested? Are they coming? What's happening? And after following up a couple times, still didn't hear anything. And then the student walks in on the first day, and I was kind of like, hey, like I didn't hear from you leading up. And it turns out that our site had the wrong email from the student. So student had been trying to reach out, they couldn't reach me. I had been wondering, why isn't the student reaching out? Are they ghosting me? So it's just a big miscommunication. So it's very important early on, if you're not able to establish contact with your CI, that maybe you're reaching out to the site or maybe you're reaching out to your director of clinical education just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Because the last thing you want is that additional friction headed into the rotation where your CI thinks, oh, like maybe they're not interested, or maybe they don't care, because chances are it is just miscommunication, kind of like we saw. So I would say that if you are going on a clinic rotation, definitely send an email ahead of time. What I typically recommend is 2 to 3 weeks out, send an email that says something along the lines of, hey, my name is so and so. I'm a blank year student in physical therapy school. These are the rotations I've had in the past. And with that, you can just list, what setting it was, what your experience has been, and then if there's anything that you want to work on. So you can talk about strengths, you can talk about weaknesses, whatever it might be, just to give your CI a little bit more context in terms of where you're at clinically. The more information you give them, the better plan that your CI is going to be able to come up with in terms of how they can help you reach their goals. I always tell students, I'm happy to help. I'm happy to do whatever I can to take you from where you are now to where you want to be. But in order to get there, we need to, you need to know what those strengths and weaknesses are, and need to know what you're trying to get out of the clinical. And then if you're able to share that with your clinical instructor, they can do a much better job compared to if they don't know, they're just guessing, and comparing where you're at to other students that they've had in the past. So send that email 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time. You don't need to send it any sooner. If you send it sooner, it's probably going to get lost. And if you send it too close, your CI is not going to have the chance to go over that with you. The next thing that's important to talk about is just clarifying expectations. So whether it's in that email or whether it's during the first week, having a good understanding of what's expected of you as a PT student, I would always send in my email, I would ask, like, am I going to be shadowing week one? Am I going to be treating right away? How am I going to be evaluated? This one might be a little bit better for in person. We'll talk about that in a minute. But ask about dress code, ask about parking, just any of those logistical pieces to make your life easier as you head into clinic rotation. You're already a little bit anxious, so the more variables that you understand or more variables you can control, the better you're going to feel about everything. But once you actually go in on day one or sometime during the first week, that's when you're going to want to talk about how you're going to get evaluated. So, is it something where you're going to get written evaluations? Are you going to get feedback that's in the moment? Are you going to get feedback that's delayed? Is the feedback all going to be verbal? Um, Talk a little bit about how you want to receive feedback, or at least have that conversation. Because what I found both as a student and as a clinical instructor is that, again, it reduces so much anxiety if you understand when the feedback's coming, how it's coming. So it's not just some big surprise where it's like, oh my God, like I'm getting all this feedback all of a sudden, like what, like this feels very critical, versus, okay, I just finished my evaluation. Now my CI is going to give me feedback. This is just our natural flow. So understanding that too can be helpful. And then talk a little bit with your CI about setting weekly goals. So from week one, you should have some sort of an idea of what the progression is going to be. A lot of schools will use the CPI or some sort of other grading platform to come up with a rating of if you're, beginner, intermediate, getting close to entry level. That's going to be something that like you need to meet certain marks to pass your clinical rotations, but there should be weekly goals on top of that as well, just between you and your CI. So that could be something like maybe perform an evaluation with minimum assist from your CI, or maybe it's perform these certain special tests, or maybe it's improve, your exercise prescription for certain cases, or personal favorite would be able to describe a certain condition or answer a certain question easily by the end of so and so week. These don't have to be these don't have to be goals that follow any sort of progression like that your school would want to see. These are just between you and your CI, what you're struggling with, what you want to improve on, and so on. And then other things to consider is just you're going to have a lot of different personalities from the CIs that you work with. Some of your CIs you're really going to mesh with, other CIs you might struggle with a little bit more, depending, like it could have to do with the setting, it could have to do with feedback style, could have to do with communication, the flow of the clinic. So don't get discouraged if you don't 100% click with every single CI you work with. That's to be expected. I always tell students, if you can have two out of your four CIs be really, really solid, that's great. Because oftentimes you'll learn just as much from a situation where the CI is great as you do from a situation where the CI is maybe not so good. Because ultimately you're learning how you want to practice. So take those elements from the CIs that you liked and then take the feedback and take elements from the things you didn't like from the CIs you didn't necessarily get along with as well. So consider all that, but these are just some general tips, general things you should be thinking about as you head into your clinic rotations. But really, if you're reaching out early, you're sending that email, you're establishing some sort of contact, you're setting expectations once you get into clinic, you're figuring out what those goals are, and figuring out where you want to be by the end of the rotation, and then just being, having solid communication in terms of setting expectations, how you're going to receive feedback, all that good stuff. As long as you address that, you're going to be successful in your clinic rotations, or at least have an understanding of how you're progressing. If you don't, the less you do with that, with these elements on the front end, the more you're going to be guessing as the clinical progresses. And the further you get along in your rotation, the harder it is to go back and all of a sudden establish some of these practices, such as setting weekly goals, getting feedback on a regular schedule, and things like that. But I mean, if you're new to clinicals or you have your first rotation, second rotation, even if it's a later rotation, I actually put together a first week checklist into a free resource. This is specifically for gearing up for your next clinic rotation. It's called the Clinical Confidence Starter Kit, and it's five frameworks that you can use as you head into clinic just to reduce any stress that you have and really to set yourself up for success as you get into the clinic. It's free, it's linked in my description. So you can go ahead and grab it before your next rotation. It'll walk you through everything you need to do so that you're not guessing as you head into your rotation. That's all I have for this episode. If you guys have any questions or feedback, I'm more than open to it. You can DM me on Instagram at ThePocketCI. Um, that's going to be the best way to get a hold of me. But yeah, open to any feedback. And then also, if you're enjoying the podcast, if this has been helpful at all, I'd love it if you guys give me a 5-star review. It'll just help increase visibility and make sure that we can help more students. So that's all for today. Have a great week, and we'll see you on the next one.